Good afternoon or good morning, depending on what part of the country you're in. This is Jed Brewer with the Below the Line Club and Study Groups. Really pleased to have you on the call today as we continue our webinar series on how do we grow our inside sales and make ourselves better at the same time. If you followed our retail webinar series, we've discussed a number of topics recently. Some of the ones that we've touched on and how to grow and improve our businesses are going touchless in this new COVID environment. Where do we drive touches out of the customer experience? We've talked about e-commerce delivery and curbside delivery. We've addressed digital signage. How do we use cameras to capture customer information and make better business decisions, enhance security? We've talked about the trend towards robotics, whether that be in food service, it could be autonomous cleaning. We've also talked about operations excellence. How do we make ourselves deliver our brand standard 100% of the time without fail? And today we're going to talk about two additional trends that are confronting us as convenience retailers. First is going to be best practices in food service, in inventory and production management. And really pleased to have Sarah Montgomery with us to touch on that topic. And then second, we're going to talk about alternatives to loyalty programs. And Greg Seei, who's the CEO and founder of Robust Promotions, is going to touch on that topic. I'll introduce Greg a little bit more as we get close to his time, but we'll start with Sarah. A brief introduction of Sarah. She's the sales director at Applied Data Corp. And if you want to know who Applied Data Corp is, or ADC, but they are a technology company, and they work with supermarkets, convenience stores, and other food service providers, and they provide technology really to help better manage fresh food. And the technology helps with ordering, production, inventory and waste, label printing, recipe manage, all of the above. And if you just think a little bit about the types of firms in the supermarket C-store space that they work with, there's about 120 customers that they have across the nation, and they operate collectively over 15,000 retail sites. So they understand food well and production and inventory management. So Sarah, we'll start with you, and I just want you to tell us a little bit about what are those best practices out there that are going to enable us to, really manage our inventory better and ultimately produce well. And Sarah, I'm going to make you the presenter so people can see your screen on their screen. And for the audience, we want to make this as educational as possible. So if you have questions, please type those into the GoToWebinar dialog box. I will be able to read them, and I can pass them along to Sarah or Greg at the appropriate time. So Sarah, best practices for managing inventory and production in this post-COVID world that we're in.
Sure. Thank you, Jed. And thanks so much for having ADC back on. And thanks everybody for logging in today and spending some time with myself and with Greg. We're really excited to be back together. So like Jed mentioned, I'm Sarah Montgomery with ADC. I've probably talked to a lot of you before being involved with Below the Line Club. So great to hear and speak with any familiar faces that are on. And as Jed mentioned, the pandemic has brought to light many areas of food service that C-stores, some of the C-stores out there were already struggling with. And so it really just enhanced that. And those two areas being managing inventory and production levels in store. So today I'm going to share how some of our clients have been implementing best practices in these two different areas to improve their bottom line and share some of those details with you today. And as far as the agenda goes, I'll start with identifying some of the opportunities that we've seen and talking with many different convenience store clients all across the United States, and then give you those best practices and some tangible takeaways in both inventory and production levels that hopefully you can take some little nuggets from each one of these and have something that you can go back with and think differently about. And then lastly, I'll end with talking about how others are executing on these best practices in their stores and what that's meant for them. And we'll leave plenty of time here at the end for any questions. So as far as the opportunity goes, I want to start and take a few minutes to identify some of the areas that I'm seeing from food service retailers that have become challenges and areas that we can all take advantage of and be leaders in. And I will point out that I have included a few little memes on these slides just to make sure everybody is awake here. So hopefully you enjoy those as well. So the first area I wanted to talk about, or the first opportunity, is that purchasing habits have changed for C-stores. And we all have the opportunity to rise up and meet this new demand and meet the consumers where they are with what they want. Consumers aren't buying for the same reasons that they have in the past, or maybe they're buying different items, or they're purchasing at different times. So it's important to recognize these different areas and identify why they're visiting your stores and what they're looking for from you. And so a challenge I'm seeing across the board is that anticipating this demand so that you can have those products ready is so much harder than it's ever been. We're seeing different trends. We don't always know what we're facing. I know with the fall coming up, a lot of folks are thinking there could be a rise. Some people don't. So again, we have a lot of uncertainty around us right now. So that does cause some overproduction in some instances, which can create excess waste and therefore lower margins, which we all hate to see. And an opposite effect that happens in some stores is that if you're not producing enough, then you're missing out on sales and you're not having that product available for your client, which most people would argue is probably even worse than too much waste when it comes to the food service business. And I did want to include a few real examples just to let you know that there may be some other people out there that are experiencing the same things that you might be. There's one chain out on the West Coast with over 400 stores that shared with me that they really feel like their stores are missing opportunities when it comes to sales. And the culture at their particular stores is that folks are very afraid to make too much because they don't want to waste. Waste is very bad in their culture. And I really do see it kind of goes one way or the other. Either there are cultures where waste is a bad thing and we can't have too much waste, or there are cultures where folks just don't care so much. They're producing and just keeping full shelves all the time, and the result is too much being thrown away. And some of you may be also dealing with this, like Chris Farley down here working from home. Like I talked about, these purchasing habits have changed. People are staying at home, eating at home. So we're dealing with all sorts of things around trying to understand what these new habits are.
Hey, Sarah, in the data that you have you seen waste increasing in this post-COVID world?
Yes, Jed, from people that I've been working with, especially initially, when the crisis hit, we saw that waste was extremely high as stores were trying to figure out what to do and how to manage that new demand. And I do have a few ways we've seen some of our retailers be successful in helping decrease that waste and keep that right level later on.
Thanks.
Absolutely. And the second opportunity I wanted to point out is that customers are wanting their food to be as clean and as contactless as possible. So many retailers have started to offer their individually packaged foods. For example, maybe you've had a breakfast or donut case in the past, but now you're packaging these individually so that folks can just walk up and grab that item right off the shelf without feeling like it's contaminated or germs are being spread. And with that being said, it's extremely important to know what's being sold and tracking the item level inventory. This is a challenge that I'm seeing as a result of this, because if you don't know what's sold, it can be very difficult to be able to tell your store users and know how to predict what they should be making. And another key area to consider is that packaging and labor rates need to be considered now that they've been changed. So in the past, you might not have used packaging on some items that were self-serve, like those donuts I mentioned, where now maybe there's a clamshell, there's some sort of wrapped package with a label on it. And then also the labor included to do this extra packaging and these extra steps. I know that many stores are taxed with all of these different processes and cleanings that they have to go through. So there's a huge expense there when we start looking at the labor. And so I just encourage everybody to take a deeper look at these things and understand how that's affecting your margins when you're offering that contactless, cleanliness experience to your users, because there might be some surprises there when you really start to dig in. And an example of that is a store out in Texas that I've been speaking with. One of their key goals is being able to track their item level inventory, something I think a lot of retailers take for granted and think that, oh, everybody does this. But the reality is I find a lot of folks aren't as far along as they would like to be in this area. And so I'm sure everybody here knows that the difference between a cheeseburger and a bacon cheeseburger is huge when we start looking at margins and costs. So understanding that is really key to being able to offer contactless and cleanliness, but also to be doing it profitably. All right, and then the third opportunity I wanted to point out is timing. Consumers aren't always going to give us a second chance to meet their needs. So if I walk into a store and I'm really looking forward to a pulled pork sandwich, can't wait to eat that for lunch on my break, and I get there and there aren't any on the shelf, I may not come back a second time. I might go down the street and find I really like something at a restaurant nearby. So it's really critical that when we do have those customers coming into our stores, walking through the doors, and we're capturing that that person coming through, that we are attentive to their needs and have what they're looking for. And a big challenge here that I'm seeing with retailers is that there's limited visibility into inventory. And this is one of the reasons for not having items and availability of items on the shelf. And of course, if you don't have the right ingredients in store, there's no way you can make that bacon cheeseburger that we talked about. And vice versa, the other problem on the end of the spectrum is that if you have too much, you're spoiling and you're diminishing your margins very quickly that way. And there's actually a 3,000 store chain in the Northeast that told me one of their big struggles is that they have no idea what's in the freezer, both from a corporate level, but also from a store level. And that was the challenge they're having, is the spoilage that was going on, eating into their margins. So I just say that so that way, you know, if that's something that you can relate to, you don't feel like you're alone. It's even these massive chains out there that don't always have every single thing figured out. And this is probably my favorite meme here. Any food service retailer, I think, will enjoy this and might have had this come up with one of your store employees before. All right, so now that we've identified some of those areas of opportunity that we have as food retailers, I want to switch gears now and share a few tangible best practices that can help you overcome these challenges and be more profitable going forward. So let's start with inventory. And managing inventory is a great place to start when you're looking at both of these best practices. And just to start, we've already talked a little bit about the item level inventory, which is very critical here, and probably what we would recommend is the best place to start. By tracking item level inventory, you're making sure that you have visibility of all of your different products, you know what's being sold, and you can better help your store users anticipate demand. And also being able to label those items is really key to tracking that and knowing what's being sold. Of course, you can have different hotkeys at the register, but if you're able to, a lot of times that labeling is key to make sure it's really easy on your cashiers and your food service team to have a seamless process that can be followed across the board. The second area I want to point out is when and how often you do inventory counts. We see that most convenience stores schedule their counts maybe once or twice a month on average. And while that is great, you might have some stores that need to be taking inventory more often, and maybe they have some specific areas that they need more help in. Maybe it's back office supplies, or not back office supplies, but your backroom supplies. And your packaging, or maybe it's some of your high dollar items like the bacon we talked about on that bacon cheeseburger, and the meats that you want to pay particular attention to. And another idea is doing inventory counts before ordering and having that practice in stores for your users to go check the freezers and make sure they know what's back there before they place an order. There are even ways that you can completely take that burden off of stores and have computer-assisted ordering to help them with that. But it doesn't have to be that complicated. There can also just be some simple processes in place that they can check and just get a better grasp of this, and that will drastically help with that inventory level. And third here, I have counting perpetual inventory before producing. Something I see all the time, especially when it comes to items with over 24-hour shelf lives, is you'll go back into a kitchen at a convenience store and, maybe I'm that first shift that comes in, I'm the bakery person, and I'm always putting the cookies in packages and getting those out on the shelf. So I come in and I make my normal amount. Let's say I make 20 chocolate chip bags that need to go out on the shelf. I make those only to walk out to the shelf and realize I already had 10 on the shelf and I really didn't need to make 20. So it sounds very simple, but something just as easy as that, and having your employees go check to see what's out there before producing more can drastically help. And then lastly here, I have recording waste with the keyword accurately beside that. So it's really it's not enough to just capture waste when it comes to your categories, but also the individual items. So, for example, not just a donut, but the difference between a glazed donut and an apple fritter. And why that's so important is if you're able to track that throughout the day, again, you're going to be able to make better business decisions, helping your stores anticipate what they need to be making and controlling your margins and profits. All right, so now to move on to production. Managing production is arguably the most impactful way to manage your food service profits. However, it's definitely the most challenging to master as well and to continuously maintain. So one of the first ways to start better managing your production is being able to look back at your historical sales and find out how much your store users should be making and give them these helpful predictions and build-to guides. And so one suggestion that ADC has here that we've seen working really well for convenience stores is to not just simply look back to what you did last year, especially during these uncertain times that are constantly changing. That's really not going to be accurate enough. So something else to consider is, again, not just looking back 1 year to see what you did at this time, but looking back that shorter period of time, whether it be 2 weeks to 4 weeks, and also looking at that demand and the trends there. And we've seen with some of our clients that they've seen great results by doing this. It's helping them get a more accurate production number and keep up with these trends. I know, a lot of people are looking at sales results now that kids are going back to school, and hopefully more people are out on the road making more stops. So definitely a great time to start doing this and looking back at these sales to anticipate any new trends coming your way. The second thing I have here is day part production. So in addition to making sure you're looking at those sales, you're considering a more recent period so you can better anticipate trends, it's also important to evaluate your new peak hours and produce accordingly. I know many folks that I've talked to have told me that afternoons we're seeing a lot of increased traffic versus morning time, especially when the crisis initially hit. So it's a great time now that things have settled a bit. I hate to say the new normal because we're all tired of hearing that, but it really is true. It's a great time to look at your new peak hours and understand how your store users can better produce according to those times.
So is that a general trend that we're seeing, Sarah, that there's a greater shift from morning time to later in the day?
Jed, I can't say that for certain right now based on the trends of school going back and people going back to work, but I do know that many of the C stores that I work closely with have told me during the midst of the pandemic when it first got started that afternoon they definitely saw spikes where the morning traffic was going down. Mm-hmm. I was just reading something published by NACS this morning about everybody's trying to see how school is going to influence that since food service has been slightly down in terms of sales.
The general point you make is a very good one, which is things are different now, and we need to be mindful and looking at the data and more recent data to try to discern how customer behavior is changing.
Absolutely. And again, we've seen, looking at that shorter time frame and just a couple weeks back has done a lot of good for the people we work with. So a third point that I had on here was using your future production to help determine your orders. So if you're doing 1 and 2 well, then number 3 comes very naturally, and you can start looking ahead to what your store should be making to help you determine your orders. So I'm sure most people are already doing this. However, it is a great reminder that now that things have changed so much, it's a great time to make sure that your orders, that you're getting the appropriate amounts and not too much and spoiling, like that one example I gave earlier. A fourth point here are minimum shelf quantities on key items. So there's a philosophy with many convenience stores that a full shelf display signifies freshness to customers. You want to come in and see a lot of product on the shelf, so it's fresh, and it entices customers to want to purchase that product and keep purchasing that product. And while that is incredibly true and very important, we think it's really important to be selective about what items you promote a full shelf display for. And I'll explain. There's one client that I worked with that had launched a better for you item that they were selling on their shelves. And we started analyzing the data, and we found that on average, their stores only sold 1 of these items a day. However, this item was being made every hour throughout breakfast and lunch. So they were having 8 to 10 of these made every day, throwing away all of them except for 1, which was very discouraging to see. It's an incredible amount of waste, not a profitable item at all. And, fortunately, we were able to correct that. But something that's really key here, and I think what this story surfaces, is that, you might want to have that better for you and healthy vision for your customers. You might want them to come and see that product on the shelf, but it's important to weigh at what expense does that come, and are you okay with that? How far is too far? And so something that client was able to do is really evaluate, okay, well, maybe we only need this on the shelf at these certain times, because our better for you items are most important during this breakfast hour and this lunch hour. So I think that's a great way to start looking at your items and make sure that that's a level of waste that you're comfortable with on these. Fifth here is considering the profitability of your items. I touched on this earlier, but again, when you have new packaging involved and new labor processes, and you're trying to meet these new COVID safety precautions, it might be that your glazed donuts or what have you might not be as profitable as they were, might not meet your standards for offering that product, and could be a good time to reevaluate some retail pricing or which items you're offering to clients. So I highly recommend that, in particular the labor, because that can really start to creep up on you. And then lastly here, if you are one of the stores that's trying to offer more of these individually packaged items and you are packaging everything, we recommend you label it. By labeling, you're able to track the sales at the register more closely, and you'll know exactly what was sold, which again is going to go back to helping you help your store users know what to produce at the right times. All right, and so now I want to share a few examples of how retailers out there are executing on these best practices and how it's impacting their business. The first example here is Country Fair. Country Fair is a convenience store operator in Erie, Pennsylvania, and they do operate full delis in their stores and have a great array of fresh food offering inside. And they have transitioned through the crisis to offer many more grab and go items compared to their made to order delis. So that's been a huge focus for them in trying to get more of this product on the shelf. They're also a store that operates with many food deserts, where somebody might not be within 30 to 40 minutes of a grocery store, and this might be their grocery store locally in communities. So that's really been a huge help to them. Something they do is tracking their item level inventory, and that helps them control their shrink and help produce accurate amounts, particularly with their baked items. I've seen that not just here, but with a lot of convenience stores are now individually packaging bakery items. And again, if you're able to put labels on that and track that accurately, then you're going to get a lot of visibility that you might not have had previously. And then lastly, one of the things that they've done to help during the COVID pandemic is by offering kiosks to their customers. So that way it's helping them order completely by themselves and have greater social distancing.
Sir, I have a question on the kiosks. I understand that you have the distance between you and the cashier in person. Is there a greater aversion to using kiosks by people due to the touch screens? Have you noticed any trends or data around those?
I'd say the trends that I've noticed there are that, I feel like there are a few different routes you can look at. Of course, you could look at kiosk that may make your customers feel more safe, but at the same time, you will have, like you said, a touch screen. So that's something that you have to think about sanitizing. Another outlet would be mobile ordering. If you have an app and a loyalty program that you offer, or you could also offer online ordering. So there are a lot of different ways you can go about it. And what I'm seeing is that it really depends on what retailers had before and what they feel like they could execute on best. So I'm seeing that maybe clients without anything at all, if they didn't have kiosk, mobile ordering, or online ordering, I am seeing a lot of them lean more towards doing online ordering because it fits their business model and it's easier because they don't have anything in place now, where I have seen some retailers where if they're already down that kiosk path, that it makes a lot of sense for them to continue down that path.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Thank you.
Absolutely. The next example I have here is Come and Go. And Come and Go is a chain with over 300 stores in the Midwest. And something that they've been able to do, one of the best practices they use is helping employees track their waste accurately, like we talked about. And by helping the employees and ensuring that they are tracking accurately, they were able to modify their production, ultimately increasing their margins in their test stores by 16%, just by having employees track waste accurately, which sounds so simple, but one of those things that's so crazy it just might work, and it has for them tremendously. And
Sure,
another,
do you know how they were tracking waste accurately?
Sure. So they are a client that uses ADC tools to do that. However, I will say, like I mentioned before, sometimes you don't always need, a fancy tool or software to help you with something, as long as you have a solid practice in place. So it might be something where you have your different items listed and employees are marking it down on sheets. I'd say that's definitely a more basic level all the way up to software that can do it for you. I think what's most important is finding something that works and sticking to it. And that was really the key here, is when you can stick to it and help your store managers convey that message to stores in a way that's impactful. That's really where the magic happens, and you'll start to see those results.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And one thing I wanted to point out to that same point is they were able to implement call-in ordering and curbside pickup as part of their COVID response, which has worked very well for them. There are many articles published that many people might have already read about. And to that same point, I think there's a lot of room for creativity when it comes to managing food service. And you don't always have to spend a lot of money to get really fancy, shiny new technology. Sometimes it's really about finding something that works for your stores, works in your environment, and again, sticking to it and making that a habit in your stores. And with all of that being said, I just want to say thanks again for the time today. I'll pause now, and if anybody's got questions, or if Jed, you've got other questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Yeah. Please feel free to type in one question. You mentioned point three, I think it was, when somebody comes in, you've got a short window to really capture them. And in the past, retailers have used sampling at times to get them the customer exposure to their food, et cetera. Obviously, sampling has taken a hit during COVID. Have you seen creative alternative ways that retailers are engaging product or customers with their products, particularly their food?
Sure. I wish I had some great ideas to share there, Jed, but you're right. Sampling has taken a huge hit. I'm not seeing any of the C-stores I work with or talk to offering samples of any kind right now. I'd say samples certainly an area that's taken a hit, and I'm still not seeing a lot of self-service areas that have fully recovered. I've seen more roller grills than anything, but I still have seen a lot of self-service areas closed as well. So I think those are two gaps that there's room for creativity for somebody to come up with a great way to try product, whether it's a loyalty program where you're offering, instead of let's say a free candy bar, maybe it's a free barbecue or pulled pork sandwich you're offering. Something like that could be what I would think about, but it's definitely a lot of room for creativity there.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. We'll go ahead and transition now to Greg C. But Sarah, appreciate the very tangible best practices that you shared and how we can better align our companies in the time of the post-COVID. I like how you phrased that. So Greg, just to introduce you briefly, Greg, I know you're a serial entrepreneur. You're the founder of Robust Promotions. And so who is Robust Promotions? They're a 14-year-old award-winning sweepstakes and promotional agency. They were actually the ones who originated the Albertsons Monopoly game, which is 12 years old, and they've done $250 million in prizes per year. And one of the things that Greg is going to be talking about is alternatives to loyalty programs, as specifically as it relates to sweepstakes, which is his more cup of tea. But we all have these loyalty programs out there, and some of them are stale. We've kind of captured our audience, and what do we do is in this next phase? So Greg and Robust Promotions, that's what they are going to talk about here today, and just a little bit more about Robust Promotions, some of the companies they've worked with, McDonald's being one, Popeyes, Wendy's, TA, Petro, Applebee's, TGI Fridays, Godfather's Pizza, et cetera. And as we mentioned, they've been heavily into games and other ways to attract attention. So with that brief introduction, Greg, tell us a little bit about sweepstakes and what are the advantages as an alternative to the loyalty programs that many of us have.
Sure thing. Thanks for the introduction, Jed. And thanks, Sarah, for your presentation. It was great. And thanks to everybody who made this happen today. I am Greg Seei, the founder and CEO of Robust Promotions, and I'm going to be talking to you today about sweepstakes and how we see them coexisting with loyalty programs. Today, I plan to discuss how fuel demand is down and how loyalty programs alone won't help you sell more fuel and convenience items. There are alternatives out there that other industries employ, which could be quite useful in fuel and convenience category. Giving away money never gets old. It's our favorite part of our job is when we get to call people and tell them that they've won something. A couple of examples. You see the couple in the center of the screen. They're snowbirds from the Northeast. They're on a fixed income, spend half their year in Arizona. And because of the fixed income, they were thrilled when we called and told them that they were the grand prize winner of a chain that we were working with, who gave away a meal a week for a year. And their delight was particular because they'd go there every week for date night, but they were splitting an entree. And because they won this, they could go every year and each get an entree, or once a week for that year, and each get an entree. So that's the kind of thing. There's another one that's just top of mind. We had a pizza chain that we did a promotion with, one of many with that chain. We get about 80% of our work from repeat customers. But this pizza chain at this promotion gave away also a meal a week. It was a pizza, a large pizza, any toppings. And so that constitutes 52 pizzas for a year. The winner asked if she could get all 52 at once, and we asked why. And somebody asked, do you have a large family? And she said, yes. And they said, oh, how many children? She said, 9. And so we were thinking, well, she needs it in a hurry because she can't feed the brood. It turns out that the manager of the local store said, yeah, we can do 52. Can we do off-peak? What's the occasion? We said, we just got a big family. That wasn't it. She was donating all 52 to a women's shelter where she volunteered. So those are the sorts of anecdotal things that get attached to your brand, and they make what we do really fun. So the challenge is to fuel demand. What's lurking around the corner? Everyone knows that COVID's had an impact. Basically, in 2017, 1 in 29 U.S. workers was working from home. What's happening now and what we think will be the legacy moving forward post-COVID is it can get as high as 1 in 5, perhaps 1 in 6 workers are forecast to work from home, at least part-time. As people are also not going out as often, obviously miles are down driven, so people are measuring their fuel usage really in miles per week instead of miles per gallon. And with fuel economy increasing in the vehicles, and with so many vehicles going electronic now, we see that persisting. Industry consolidation is giving the bigger competitors even more room to run on margins. And QSR competitors don't really need to compete on price. So more and more growing volume means stealing market share from competitors. This slide's interesting for a host of reasons, but we zeroed in on the 2 columns that show gas and convenience year over year compared to last year, pre-COVID, kind of settling in around 10% less than what it was before visits, whereas online is hovering around 40 to 50% over what it was previous year. So what this is translating into is trips to shopping malls and big boxes and to work are down significantly. It's going to stay that way for the foreseeable future, if not forever. And that's putting pressure on the opportunities to sell fuel, obviously, and convenience store items. So we're proposing that we go beyond just loyalty. We don't necessarily want to replace loyalty as much as augment loyalty programs. So what are we proposing? There's some problems with loyalty in the convenience sector that are somewhat different than what we've experienced in 14 years with the restaurant sector. And primarily, we're talking about most of the loyalty programs in the convenience sector are current customer focused. And really the game is won or lost by getting new customers or lapsed customers to come in more often and buy more when they're there. There's lack of consumer engagement with most of these app-based loyalty programs. You're just strictly discounting, and it's just not an interactive, brand-friendly experience. They're relatively expensive to develop and deploy, and the pricing is usually insignificant and ultimately ineffective. The incentives just aren't significant enough to modify consumer behavior in the ways that marketers want. Lastly, really compared to restaurants, there's not the same sort of brand affinity and loyalty as you might experience with, say, someone who's a big fan of Outback who wants to go every week on their date night to get a bloomin' onion. There's really not that same experience with, a certain octane of gas from one brand versus the next. And anecdotally, again, my son insists that we go to Benihana every year on his birthday, but he's never once said, "Can we go to Shell next year instead of BP?" So that's a challenge. But the good news is there's opportunities in your sector that are superior to the restaurants, and I want to touch on those too. So we're just imploring people not to just be lemmings and do what everyone else is doing. If everyone offers virtually the same thing, there's no longer a competitive advantage. It's not a differentiator anymore. So we think that this not only is not terribly eventful, and it doesn't really move consumer behavior in the desired ways, but it's also, once you're doing what your competitor's doing, you're just matching them. So there's really no competitive advantage. So what else can be done? Well, what if customers had the opportunity to win an instant win prize of significance, or better yet, a chance to enter a drawing for a sweepstakes with a life-changing prize? So faced with the proverbial fork in the road, you've got two options here, we propose. If you go station A, you save 5 cents a gallon on gas. You have to use their app, which is more cumbersome and has more friction than most app developers and most of the brands really appreciate or are able to overcome in the marketplace. Saw a study recently where 80% of app usage falls on 4 or 5 apps for the average user, and yet 10,000 apps per month are submitted to the Apple Store. So they're not making more than 24 hours in a day, and we think that the last benefit's been wrung out of loyalty programs the way that they've been constituted and used. However, what if the same customers faced with an opportunity to fill at least 10 gallons of gas, or spend at least $10 inside the store and get a scratch-off card with a chance to win an instant win prize or a big prize, a life-changing prize? So let's look at that. So if you go the app route, you've got to download another app. You have to pay attention to that app. You have to keep that in top of mind to say, okay, what's my app at BP versus my app at Shell or Marathon? And most people have very busy lives and they're not going to track that too closely. However, if they're presented with a scratch-off card because they made a qualifying purchase that is beneficial to the merchant, they have a chance now to engage immediately, the excitement of winning something immediately, telling friends that they want something immediately, and or the chance to enter a code online to enter a drawing for a significant prize or prizes. Another benefit to promotions of the type that we've been running for 14 years is what is termed earned media. It's basically free PR. Those of us who are old enough to remember Publishers Clearinghouse for decades saw Ed McMahon popping out of a white van branded Publishers Clearinghouse, a bouquet of balloons, a foam core check with $1 million or more, and they ring the homeowner's bell. That sort of PR is routine for the sorts of promotions that we run, where we're giving away significant prizing. You don't get that sort of PR opportunity because it's not newsworthy if you get 5 cents off a gallon. So we want to change the value proposition in the sector, and how can sweepstakes help? Well, learning from restaurants and what we've been doing for 14 years, they have generally the scale to do significant promotions on their own, and they do. Collectively, though, in your industry, we can offer opportunities for individual brands to act together using these common denominators of 10-gallon minimum fill or $10 spend inside the store to reduce the costs associated with promotions like this. That's legal costs, that's printing scratch-off cards, the cost of which plummets when you print in scale. The microsite to collect the entries for the codes for the drawing, all of the associated costs can be shared and amortized over the participating units. And because there's multiple units, the prize pools rise. So it's nice to be, an analogy is nice to be Connecticut and be able to give away $2 million in a lottery. It's better to pool your resources with nearby states like New York, New Jersey, and perhaps Massachusetts, and give away $300 million. And generally speaking, the efficacy, the effectiveness, that is, of a promotion tracks almost linearly with the prize pool. So the larger the prize pool, the bigger the bang for the buck, so to speak. So challenges for restaurant chains, challenges for retailers in your sector, unlike restaurants. Fuel retailers have a unique structure that makes organizing a promotion, excuse me, someone's at the door, organizing a promotion particularly challenging. But as I mentioned in the previous slide, collectively, retailers can fund lottery-level prizes by pooling their resources. And it creates opportunities for independents to scale and fund prizes on their own. They can share the legal costs. Again, it's kind of redundant what I said on the previous slide, unless I jumped ahead. And restaurants can give away their brand in free food for a year. Retailers in your sector, we recommend, based on our experience and data that we've mined for 14 years, we expect and want you to give away large consumer excitement prizes like a car, a cash, a trip, things of that nature. That's what's going to move the needle. Full disclosure, Stop and Win is a program that we've created. It's a turnkey program that's exclusive for independent fuel retailers and C-stores. And it's built for all the purposes I just ran over. We can run it with as few as 100 locations per campaign. And we expect that it will be rather like the lottery, except these are legal sweepstakes. So we think the participating locations will stick with it, one campaign to the next. And that's, again, about 80% of our yearly revenue comes from repeat customers in the restaurant space. We think that will track here as well. Our modeling shows that the anticipated ROI should be around 11x. That's based on NACS figures. That's based on consultants who we've hired and worked with for the last year and a half putting this program together. There are basically all things pointing to at least 11x return. So for every dollar you invest in the program, you get $11 back. And then that doesn't really account for the lifetime value of the customer and other things that will reveal themselves over time.
So Greg, let me just pause and make sure I'm following how this works here. But what you're saying is you'll take just as an example, a 10-store chain in New Jersey, a 25-store chain in Delaware, and et cetera. And once you have at least 100 locations, more is the merrier. That all gets pooled together into a program, and then you're going to roll that out. How are the prizes funded?
There's an investment for each participating location. The 3-month program that we're signing up for right now, $1,695 for 3 months. That's $565 a month, and the prize pool comes out of that, as does the marketing database that we develop for each participating unit from the customers who register. They surrender their contact information. They want to be notified in case they win. So we build your database. It funds the legal, the printing and distribution of the scratch-off cards, all the POP materials. We've got register tape at the pumps that indicates, hey, if you've filled 10 gallons, go inside and ask the cashier for your scratch-off card, and also spend $10 while you're in there, get a second one. So all of those things are incorporated in the program. Just to put it in context, a typical restaurant promotion that we've been running for 14 years with customers that we've had for 12, 13, 14 years usually runs around $1,000 per month of distribution. But the other thing about that, and this is less than that, but this is less than that primarily because your traffic is about 6 times the traffic that, say, an Applebee's or TGI Fridays enjoys. They get typically in an environment like that, 5,000 people a month per NACS, and we're seeing numbers like 1,000, 1,100 in just the forecourt alone on a day. So you're about 5-6x what a sit-down restaurant is. So
and then Greg, you say the ROI is 11 times, and I assume you're baking into that number is based on your past work with restaurants, your expectation of what the augmented sales are going to be, and that's where the ROI is coming.
Yeah, we're anticipating our modeling is pointing to a 10 to 12% increase in sales. We're basing us on a 10%, so the low end of that, and it's based on not just our experience with restaurants. There for 230 units of TA's minute marts. We worked with them they owned them for about 2 or 3 years, and we ran a number of promotions with them. That's when we got intrigued by the customer counts in your industry. So we've got some pretty hard data from that as well.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and then it's a question. You said independent fuel retailers. Like, let's say I'm my own private company, but I have an Exxon station. Can I participate with that branded Exxon station?
Yeah, yes, you can. Any brand that allows the operator to run their own marketing is fair game. Just bringing it back to restaurants, the only restaurant chain that we're aware of that prohibited anyone using our services is Subway, and they're almost always in litigation with their franchisees. It's a very contentious situation. But every other chain that we've ever worked with in the restaurant sector has allowed the operators to go their own way. They call it pay to play. We're in talks with a fuel retailer right now that has 150 of their 300 units that is a brand of fuel that is dispensed at those locations. And they're not only allowed to do it, they're getting co-op money to offset the cost.
Okay. Well, thanks, Greg, for letting me interrupt you. I'll let you continue on.
Sure. Okay. We're signing up right now through September 1st. The launch, we need about 6 weeks to get everything together and in market. Legalities. People ask, is this legal? The answer is yes. We use the same law firm that does the McDonald's Monopoly game, which has been running since 1987. We hired them because they were the law firm that fixed a problem that Monopoly had around 2000, where a rogue printer printed too many game pieces and then actually turned most of them in. It's a Showtime special, HBO special recently. But we hired this law firm because they fixed those cracks in the system. And they happen to be in Chicago, downtown Chicago, 14 miles from our headquarters. But if they were in Miami or Seattle, we would have hired them. They're one of the preeminent law firms that specializes in advertising law and intellectual property and promotions and sweepstakes law in the world. So you're in good hands. There's 4 real things that we need to concern ourselves with to make sure that our promotions and sweepstakes and contests are not illegal lotteries. We can have no more than 2 of the following 4 elements: skill, prize, chance, and consideration. Consideration is a change of value. Usually it's money for a good or a service. In the most of the promotions we run and in the ones that we're talking about running in your business, skill would not be an issue. Prize, yes, we always have prizes. Chance, yes, we always have chances. That's what makes it fun. Any of you that have follow your sports team and you hear the local guy tell you to turn the radio down so that you don't hear the score so you can watch it later, there's always more fun associated with chance than there is with knowing, because that's why Vegas exists. And then consideration. How do we get away with get around consideration so we're left with just 2 of the 4 to make it a legal initiative as opposed to an illegal lottery? Alternate means of entry. We cannot require payment. You see abbreviated rules. You hear them on the radio. No purchase necessary. What does that mean in practical terms? Well, in your business, I'm sure everyone's familiar with Coke or Pepsi running an ad that says, "Hey, come into 7-Eleven or wherever and see our undercap reveal sweepstakes." The implication is you need to buy the 16-ounce Coca-Cola unscrew the cap, look underneath, and see if you won a prize or not. But that would compel someone to purchase. Virtually everyone does, but you have to legally give them an opportunity to enter without purchase. That's called equal dignity in legalese. And what virtually everyone does, from McDonald's to all of our giant clients, is you give them an alternate means of entry that's usually self-addressed stamped envelope sent to a P.O. box. So the round trip postage is nearly $1.20, and then the paper and the foil. So not many people do it, but when you're offering it to hundreds of millions of Americans and Canadians, you'll get tens of thousands of these. But we've got that down. That's included, as is prize fulfillment in the $1,695 that we talked about. And if you want a primer on just the basics of legal overview for sweepstakes, prizes, contests, we have that free of charge. You can click download when it's available and when you have a moment. So
Greg, quickly here, just in our last couple minutes. So one of the points you made about loyalty programs, which I tend to agree with, is as the loyalty program space has matured and we're all kind of doing the same thing, it's hard to differentiate ourselves in the market. How are the sweepstakes going to be able to differentiate from our competitors? Are we all going to end up in the sweepstakes space, or how does that work? Give me some sites there.
No, we are. It's interesting you mentioned that. My first year in this business, we went to see a Broadway show. We stayed at the W in Times Square. My wife and I, she's an equal partner in this agency. We have 8 people. We're small and agile, but we have big customers. Anyway, she sends me out for coffee in the morning, and I went literally down the street on Times Square, and I was getting her a Starbucks, and there was 4 corners that all were selling Starbucks. 3 stores, and then one something or other that happened to have Starbucks in it. And no, we're not going to have that situation. We contractually are limiting the access to 0.2 of a mile in urban areas for exclusivity and 1 mile in rural. And then we've got other opportunities down the road, 2.0 and 3.0. Just make it very quick because I didn't think we'd get this far into it. We have an alliance partnership with the company that prints the receipt advertising on the back of grocery store receipts. All the Kroger, all the Albertsons, that's a $130 billion company, a $60 billion company, 19 and 49 on the Fortune 500. And they have 95 of the 12,000 largest grocery stores in their network, in our network now. And we're going to limit this to just one location who wants to funnel traffic from the closest grocery store into their location. Not mandatory. It's just another arrow in the quiver for those who want to join in. But that's limited to 9,500. So we're never going to get, we can't see this ever getting past 15,000 of the roughly 120,000 convenience plus C-store.
All right. Well, yeah, sounds good. Thank you so much, Greg, for educating us on this new opportunity. And Sarah, appreciate you too with ADC sharing ideas on best practices. We as retailers need to always continue to stay abreast of changes in the marketplace and figure out what we can do to increase our sales and also our margins during this time. And hope you as the audience were able to get a couple new ideas here, some things on the production and inventory side with food service, and then Greg, how do we augment our loyalty programs and continue to attract customers in this new time. So we will send out the recording for this webinar as well as the contact information and slides for each of our presenters. I know they would be happy to follow up with you on any individual questions that you have. Again, thank you, Greg. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you all for your time here, and continue to stay healthy and safe. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.